Did there come a time when Johnny left his mother's house?
Yes.
And after Johnny, what did Johnny do when he left the house?
Objection, foundation.
All right, I'll sustain his foundation if you want to lay a
She-
foundation.
Were you in communication with your brother at the time?
Yes. He came and lived with me for part of the time.
So I think that. So what did your brother do after he left your mother's house?
He lived in different places. He lived with me and he lived with another family.
Did you and Johnny continue to communicate with your mother, Betty, after you both left the home?
Yes. Yes, we did.
And after what you have described, why did you and Johnny continue to communicate with your mother?
Objection, foundation is to Johnny.
I think she's already laid the foundation. They're very close. She was in communication.
I'll sustain the objection if you want for this particular question.
Why did you continue to communicate with your mother?
Because she was our mom and we loved her. I mean, we knew, even when we were younger that things weren't, they didn't feel right, but what we understood was that, mom had her own upbringing, so she had her own past and the way she was raised would affect the way she lived. And so she, in our mind, she was doing the best she could do. We sort of treated it like she did the best that she could do with the tools that she was given, from her life in the past. And what we decided to do was we just decided to get new tools. We chose different tools from that.
And when you say we, to whom are you referring?
I'm referring to Johnny.
Objection, foundation, that's to
I'll overrule that objection. All right, next question.
Thank you, Ron. Did you ever live with your mother again after you and Johnny had left the house?
I did live with her briefly. She had gotten diagnosed with asthma when we lived in Florida, and she needed to move to a drier climate. So Johnny moved her to California, to Palm Springs for the drier weather. And I moved also so that she wouldn't be alone. So I lived with her for a period then.
And if you could just please elaborate on what role, if any, Johnny played in your mother's move to Palm Springs.
He was the only reason the move could happen. He purchased her a home and paid to have everything moved out there.
Did there come a time when your mother ever left Palm Springs?
She moved from Palm Springs to be a bit closer to where Johnny and I lived in the LA area. She lived there for a bit, and then ultimately she went back to Kentucky. Her siblings were still there, and a couple of them weren't doing well, so she wanted to be closer to them while she could.
And after she moved back to Kentucky from Palm Springs, did there come a time when your mother became chronically ill?
Yes,
When was that?
2011.
Would you please describe briefly what her health condition was as of 2011?
In 2011, she was living in Kentucky, and we received a call that she had been diagnosed with the final stages of Parkinson's. But then when another doctor looked at her scans, they felt it was something different. So we had the scans brought to a doctor in California, and they suggested that she come out and see a neurologist right away. So Johnny got a plane, a private plane, and he and we flew to go pick her up and bring her back to California to start seeing the doctors.
And when she moved back in 2011 to California, was that a permanent move?
It became basically a permanent move. She still had her house in Kentucky in the hopes of her being able to go back and forth, but her health basically kept her in California, so she lived here or there.
And by that time, 2011, when she's moved out to Los Angeles, had her treatment of you and Johnny changed in any way?
Yes, mom softened as she aged. She totally softened.
And once your mother moved to Los Angeles permanently in 2011, what role, if any, did your brother Johnny play in her caretaking?
Objection, foundation.
All right, I'll sustain as the foundation.
To what extent, if any, did your brother play any role in her caretaking?
I think that's still a foundation objection.
Do you have knowledge of whether your brother had any role in her caretaking?
Yes.
Would you please explain to the jury, because I think Her Honor needs to hear whether there's a foundation.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, when we brought Mom out, over time, she had multiple other illnesses that came up, and Johnny he dealt directly with the doctors like we did, hired private nurses so that we could make sure that, Mom was taken care of. He basically, Johnny was he took all financial responsibility for anything and everything that Mom could need or want during this time, all medical care, doctors, hospitals, nurses.
How do you know that?
I was directly involved.
Is it fair to say you saw Johnny do those things and have those interactions?
Yes, I was there. I was directly involved in all of that.
Did you witness your brother having any interactions with the doctors relating to your mother's care?
Yes.
How often, if at all, did your brother visit your mother, Betty, after she came to live in Los Angeles in 2011?
Objection, foundation.
Were you ever present with your brother and your mother when you all were visiting?
Yes. Mom lived in a house that was basically across the street from Johnny. It was a house that he has on his street. And I was there, quite a bit. Johnny was pretty much down there every day, a couple times a day. Mom, she would see them all the time. One of her favorite things was watching Johnny take the kids to school and waving at them, because she never got to do that before. So.
Who were your brother's kids?
Oh, Lily Rose and Jack.
We'll get to that in a little bit. Did there come a time when the family was considering putting your mother in a hospice?
There was there were conversations with the doctors that we should start to consider that, since we weren't 100% sure with the variety of conditions that she had, what we needed to do. The idea of hospice was something that felt like, since we didn't know a time frame, the idea of introducing new nurses or something, at a certain point in someone's life where they recognize there's a difference, and that could be frightening for them. So we didn't want to instill any fear. Johnny's big on Mom not having fear. So instead, that's when we hired nurses, so that the nurses could be there 24/7. And, and she would have people continuously throughout her life that she knew that they were friendly and, cared for.
Did you actually have a conversation with your brother about the possibility of your mother going into hospice?
Yes.
Did he express an opinion about it?
Yes. Well, this is where it all comes from, because the idea of hospice, which is an amazing thing, but for someone who, when you don't know, with the variety of illnesses, you don't know what a timing is, the idea of introducing it, new people, is something that becomes almost a signal, and this was a very big discussion. This is why the nurses were hired.